Hey Indonesians and Nusantara's! Welcome back to our third live stream this month with the theme of forms of oppression in Indonesia and its neighboring country. Today we're going to have the live stream in English because we have a special guest, which is Carrie from Australia joining us. Hi Carrie.
Hi.
And hosting it will be myself, Tildon, and my co-host Sozo. Maybe we can have a quick round of introductions first. How about you go first, Sozo?
Hello. As children has said, I am Sozo. I go by any pronouns, and I'm the one that runs the technical details of the stream usually. Hope everyone's having a good time zone today.
Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned earlier, call me Tildon. Like ever since I've read that story with the pronoun Faye, I tend to just say call me Tildon instead of my name's Tildon. Anyway, I'm my pronouns are Ninem, and I'm my like the labels I identify as is are demisexual, romantic, and also a gentle flux. Also, have a very good time zone, everyone, because we're not just working from one or two time zones, but technically from 3 time zones. Is that right, Suzo?
That is correct.
And how about you, Kerry? How about you introduce yourself to our audience?
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Kerry. I use he, him pronouns. I identify as a romantic, asexual, and transgender. I've been out as asexual for quite a number of years now. I'm a member of the Australian Asexuals admin team.
Actually, could you tell us a bit more about the Australian Asexuals team?
So Australian Asexuals as it currently exists, basically formed in 2016. We started as a group in Sydney that participates in the Mardi Gras parade under the name Australian Asexuals because it is intended as a group to unite all the local asexual groups around Australia. So currently on our team we have representatives from other states in Australia as well. So, I think originally I think Kate and Gemma were planning to come on this live stream as well, but they couldn't make it today.
Yeah, they could make it due to personal reasons, as far as I'm aware.
But yeah, as a group, we have different states have social groups for ace people, and some of us also participate in a lot of asexual awareness efforts such as media stuff, and we also go to pride parades and that. And also quite notably, the ACT ACEs have done a survey of asexual experiences, and that's also important data that we use to explain our experiences to other people.
Who can actually fill out the survey, in case anyone's wondering in the audience?
Or is the survey still being run?
At the moment, we don't have any active surveys, but there may be more of them in the future, and we'll provide details of how to access the results of current surveys.
Having more like academic research on like asexual experiences is quite thrilling because one, I tend to read papers for fun. I mean, if I have to read journal papers for the like university, I might as well read some for fun too. And also, there's not.
I'm sure we would be open to collaboration on future surveys as well. That's something to discuss after, I think.
For sure. And speaking of, as you were saying, the survey was on asexual experiences. Related to our topic for this week of oppression, what are your thoughts on the daily asexual experience where regarding oppression? Like a lot of times people say, oh, asexual people don't experience oppression or aren't oppressed at all. What are your thoughts on that?
I think anyone who claims that asexual people don't experience oppression simply either haven't been paying attention to asexual people's experiences, or they are just willfully denying it. So within the asexual community, I think some of the commonly reported forms of oppression include medical or religious discrimination, social exclusion, and emotional or physical violence. Obviously, like individual experiences will vary depending on where people live, what kind of people they have around them. But according to one of the earlier surveys, 81.7% of asexual respondents reported experiencing at least one form of oppression. So yeah, as I said, anyone who claims that we don't simply haven't been looking closely at what we're saying.
Speaking of oppression, maybe it's a good point to like talk about the theme, right, Suzo?
This week's theme? Uh,
While we're brainstorming, I mean, the card I drew.
would you like to do that? Take the honors for that, Ashley?
Okay, so while we're brainstorming, I ended up drawing some tarot cards for like just as prompts for what we could talk about. And one of the cards I drew, which eventually evolved into this week's theme, is the Ten of Wands, which is I'm using the Urban Tarot deck, and it's captioned oppression. And quoting from the guidebook that came with it, the 10 represents an idea that's become the institution and has gained the power to crush all other ideas. In this card, we have lost all the hope and freedom of potential of the earlier cards. Strength has been corrupted into cruelty, passion into obedience, creativity into intolerance. The 10 asks us to step back and consider if we have gone too far, if we have accepted inhumanity and pain in the name of an idea. It is worth remembering that there must always be room for other ideas, other voices than the one you have listened to, which I think is very relevant, also not just in the context of oppression in general, but also for in the context of what has been happening in the present here in Indonesia. Maybe you want to start talking about that, Suzo, a bit.
Regarding, although I have to preface this with, this isn't specifically like oppression against asexual people. This is more so oppression against the queer community as a whole. These past few months,
because a lot of like our server members, like in the aspec server, there's a lot of intersectionality going on there, because as usual there's this split attraction model, and some are like, for instance, lesbian and asexual, which means that they're still being affected by the wider queer issues, I think.
And in general, I think we all are affected by the wider queer issues. But I'm just prefacing this because, like, just to say it's not specifically an ace thing. Where the past few months, unfortunately, a lot of there has been a lot of public backlash against the queer community. I guess one of the from earlier in this, from May actually, there's a relatively popular online figure here in Indonesia, Dari. where he has a podcast, and around the first week of May, he invited an Indonesian gay couple to speak about their experience here in Indonesia. He gave it a clickbaity title, roughly translates to like tutorial on how to be LGBT in Indonesia. But because of this, because of his podcast video, he was unfollowed en masse by a lot of Indonesian followers of his. And he deleted the video and apologized later, saying that he said that LGBT people are deviant, but they exist, which is still not great.
And it was also like the video was taken down, I think, 3 days after it was originally aired. And during that time, there has been a lot of like the public like a moral panic basically, because especially with the clickbaity title tutorial on how to be LGBT in Indonesia, it implies that it's a lifestyle, and it implies that the podcast is like that episode of the podcast is aiming to quote unquote corrupt pious like, let's face it, Muslim people into being like weird, which is also not a nice narrative to hear about. And it's been a very trending topic on like Twitter for like 5 days, I think, and it was an uncomfortable 5 days because there's a lot of like the usual suspects that you would find on the queerphobia bingo card, for example. Like all religions forbid an LGBT, and as it mentioned, LGBT is a deviance, that kind of thing, which has been a bit hard for our community in general, because I made a choice to not follow the news too closely, especially since I don't have Twitter in the first place. But I did still feel like I did still see the effect of it in our own server. People just not feeling all that good with everything like that going on. And I think, relating back to the earlier question of the claim of asexual people not experiencing oppression, it's while we are an invisible identity and not quite well known by the mainstream and like the people on Twitter or something that are like posting all these hateful comments. Besides us that also self-identify as queer and part of the community, there's also this sort of unease. I think that all the outrage is technically aimed against someone else, and you sort of escape, quote unquote, escape the negative attention by virtue of being an invisible identity. Like, it feels a bit like a betrayal that you should like coast along while someone else is suffering very directly, and you feel like if it were a family, it would be like siblings or something, right? You don't want to see your siblings suffer.
Actually, on your point of you don't want to see your siblings suffer, that's quite relevant to the to asexual experiences, where quite often one of the problems that asexual people have is even people who are close to them, such as family or friends, don't believe they're asexual or tell them that their asexuality is something that's a problem or needs to be fixed. And on how invisibility affects us, I think yes, being invisible, it does mean that we don't necessarily get the kind of public denouncement the way that some other parts of the LGBT plus community may get. But I think invisibility leads to a different kind of problems, such as for example, medical professionals are often unaware of asexuality as an orientation and see it as something that needs to be fixed, and that can have serious consequences for some people who are seeking medical treatment, where there are known cases of people who are denied the appropriate treatment due to the concern that the medicine can cause them to lose libido, and that's somehow seen as worse than having depression, which is a major issue, because especially when this is someone who is experiencing suicidal thoughts due to their depressions.
Mm-hmm. I'd wager if you're that depressed, you probably don't have a high sex drive anyway in that situation. Mm-hmm.
And I suppose something that plays a part in that is allonormativity in our societies, where it is as you said, where they see like not having a libido is somehow worse than having depression, because they don't oh, I'm not sure how to say this in words actually.
They can quite grasp the concept of not wanting to have sex, like not feeling the need to.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one way to phrase it.
Mm-hmm. And it's so I suppose, like, to a general populace, the want to have sex, the pull, is just so natural that they don't realize that asexual people who don't feel it are being pushed aside. We feel that we're being discriminated against.
Mm-hmm. And
I think this.
Go
on, Kerry.
I think the general assumption that of people being allosexual, the problem is that because this lack of awareness of asexuality often means that people who actually don't experience sexual attraction might not realize there's a word for it, and even asexuals think there's something wrong with themselves before they discover the concept of asexuality. And also for asexual people who do want romantic relationships anyway, it's a different kind of pressure, where if they do enter relationship with someone and their partner wants sex, then that's a whole level of problem that's different from being a romantic asexual and just not wanting the partner at all. I think that's the kind of contrast.
Like, there's also lots of like quote unquote help articles where like do this for a better sex life to increase intimacy in your like a romantic relationship or whatever. That also factors into it, right? That sex is seen as such an integral part of a committed romantic relationship. Backtracking a bit to allow people not realizing that asexual people exist, because to them having sexual attraction is such a normal thing that they don't even think about it. It also is sort of reflected in, like, especially Indonesia is a very religious country. Like, lots of the populace is very religious, so there's always this culture of abstinence, right? Just of not having sex before marriage. And so, especially for like me as a demisexual, I just never thought of my not feeling sexual attraction as something odd because I was thinking I'm saving myself for marriage. But apparently, like as soon as you get married, there's this expectation of somehow like being adventurous in bed or that kind of stuff, which this also like plays into another like the hate speech. Like I once watched a video on asexuality by a local person, and I made the mistake of wandering to the comment section because I couldn't help myself. And there was one comment that I remembered the gist of, which basically goes that, uh, oh, I accepted, I accepted, I accepted asexuality exists, and it's fine because unlike other queer identities, asexuals don't spread any sexually transmitted diseases, meaning AIDS slash HIV, which is often like the narrative is often that it's gay people that spread that disease, when in fact it isn't. Like heterosexuals are like spreading, like have way more cases than in like queers, because especially in Indonesia there's not really sex education going on there. So maybe you want to talk a bit about that.
I will. I will say that, like, comments like those are not something to be happy about because they're just throwing a different part of the community under the bus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you fine by virtue of like you're getting spared by virtue of someone else suffering for it.
And even then, it's like it's very much a bad faith take on asexuality because they're only picking and choosing which parts that appeal to their worldview,
As usual.
as usual. And I'll also add on something you said earlier about how Indonesia being a Muslim majority country has this culture of like abstinence, but only to a certain point. Because in Islam, there is the responsibility of you should start a family and have a child. So like, you're not allowed to have sex, and for as an asexual as well, I did not mention that earlier, but yeah, there's going to be a point in my where for maybe like the next couple of years I'll still be safe, quote unquote, where it's like people don't mind I'm not having sex or whatever until I get married, or even if I don't even want to get married, I'm aromantic as well.
You're expected to marry.
There's this expectation that you will do it and then you will have sex eventually and then something where
Yeah, I think this expectation to get married is I mean, I think that exists in a lot of cultures around the world in one way or another. But so also, so yeah, the most common religion in Australia is Christianity, and there are many forms of it, and they ranging from more traditional to maybe more modern. Where I mean, in more conservative denominations, I think the not having sex before marriage is a thing, but as far as I understand, a lot of people who claim to be Christian don't actually quite follow that part very strictly. Yeah, it's where this kind of of course not all people of one religion kind of thing, but not being Christian myself, that it's probably not my place to comment on that in any more detail than that. But so yeah, but I think this the thing about as much as marriage is definitely the norm here, but I think uh in practice not getting married is also actually it's not too uncommon where uh here I think couples who live together and never actually go through with the paperwork, so to speak. That's an option here, and even though depending on how conservative their family members are, they may be judged for it, but on a practical day-to-day level, most people get away with it. Yeah, unless one happens to have like really conservative family, where I think this is the difference, where whether in different parts of the world, whether you have the option to not get married at all. And I think especially for women, I think this is where women's rights really tie into it.
Mm-hmm. Actually, this ties into another thing that has recently been happening in Indonesia. So the short of it is that there's an upcoming reform of the penal code, and one of the points that at least according to the 2019 draft, that is the most recent public version, there's a point about cohabitation, I think, in which it's in some ways better in the proposed reform, because the only people who can I don't know what is the delik aduan. So do you know the English word, or shall we just go with whatever sort of makes sense?
The English word. The English word for what? Sorry.
Delik aduan.
Kaduan.
So basically, the context is that like if we have two people, especially a woman and a man who are not married and not related, cohabitating, then people can report them, and that it can have legal repercussions, basically. But I think in the proposed reform, it limits the people who can report being either the spouse, if it's a married couple, and the person A is cohabiting with a stranger, which is not like which is not like the spouse, right? Or if for unmarried persons, the parents. But the thing is that so this reform has been brewing for a while, and it basically got shelved back in 2019 because there were a lot of concerns and people have been protesting. And currently the news is that it's being processed, but it's a bit of a rushed process, so to speak, because we don't even know if there's any additions or alterations from the last public draft, which is dated 2019. And that's also concerning, not just because of the cohabitation law and other aspects that have been pointed out as problematic and needing more analysis in the past, but also because during this whole moral panic, our Minister of Religion was loudly proclaiming on social media about his intent to criminalize LGBT plus people via the penal code that's currently being reformed. And he claims that he wanted to do this for several years now. I think something like one account claims that it's something that has been in progress since 2016 or something, but there's no actual evidence of that in any draft of the bill. But especially during the small panic, there's a lot of public agreement with that sentiment of the of the Minister of Religion, and it raises some concerns that because a lot of people are agreeing with this, that it might be snuck into the reform draft, that's the current draft that is, which I think it's a reasonable situation to be wary of. And the sticking point here is that the process has resumed based on the current news. The process of this revision of the penal code bill has been resumed, but there has been no new public draft that's been published for us, the people, to like have a look at and point out the issues with, because at this point it's also not clear whether there has been any changes from the last draft or not. Maybe you want to add something, Sozo or Harry?
So I can't say I know very much about your context, but then over here in Australia, where so of course the context is a bit different. Where here we do have legal recognition of same-sex marriages, where while homophobia from more conservative religious groups definitely exists, I think over here the target that a lot of the negativity is more targeted at transgender people, and especially in younger transgender people. This targeting of parents who support their teenage children affirming their gender, this targeting of schools being supportive, and also of trans women in sport. But I think by extension the this discrimination is kind of aimed at the whole community, where some people claim that it's a direct backlash that goes back to when same-sex marriage was first legalized. Where am I going with this?
Take your time, no worries.
I think the long story short is that yes, the more actively anti-LGBT sentiments do often come from more conservative religious groups here. So that's one thing that's kind of common across different countries.
It is a very unfortunate thing, and a little ironic, as well. Most religious groups they preach to be kind to one another. Yet here we are.
Here we are. Like, it also made like my personal relationship with religion in general a very complicated thing. Because on one hand, I like the values of the religion I grew up with. Because I learned all those universal values, those striving for justice and being kind and supporting one another, all that kind of stuff. And I strove to apply that to my life, right? Even though I wasn't like observant of the rituals, but I still agree with the values and try to apply them. But somehow, ever since like moving here to Indonesia, there's been a huge a flip, because people tend to focus on the outward rituals of like piety and stuff, but they don't really apply the basic values that I think are basic anyway, like the foundational attitude of how we should approach other people. So I'm sort of torn between what I feel is right and what people tell me the religion is about. How do you see it, Sozo?
Oh wow. We have gone way off topic, but I'll just very quickly answer this with
Yeah.
religion is whatever I religion is up to how you as an individual thing for me, as in like what's your relationship to God specifically. I don't really try to care about what because I won't admit that I'm a devout Muslim, but I still go through the motions and I still pray, etc., etc. But religion is between me and God, and that's how it is. Alice.
It wasn't the mindset that I grew up with because I grew up in a secular country, but coming here was a bit of a culture shock because like every sort of it feels like everyone cares. Like at school, if you aren't seen like regularly going to the mosque at noon to pray along with everyone else, basically you get singled out and quote unquote reminded to fulfill your duties when I just wasn't ready for that, like, because it's a very personal thing and it's a very like it's a personal journey that we all take at our own pace. Anyway,
Yeah.
back to
And I'm sorry to hear that that's your experience with religion. But to pull us back onto the topic very quickly, these are like all the different kinds of oppression that are currently happening and that we face on a nearly day-to-day basis almost.
Actually, on the topic of religion, can I just add
Oh,
that
go on,
so yeah,
go ahead.
so yeah, I currently live in Australia, but I was born in Hong Kong. I lived there till till I was 15. And I want to comment that Hong Kong is a slightly different case where, as a whole, there's yeah, religion is relative. Yes, religion exists there as well, but I think as a whole, the society is even more secular than that in Australia, where yeah, they are religious people, but as a whole, it's not something that gets that's most people who practice will keep it to themselves. I think this kind of openly professing your faith just isn't as much of a thing. I mean, there are exceptions. I think every country does have some of the more hardcore proselytizing types, but that's not going on about it outside of your actual religious circles just isn't as much of a thing. But the conservatism and anti-LGBT sentiments exist without the religion. So yeah, it's not always just religion. Some people are capable of having these negative sentiments without it. But yeah, the kind of aphobia over there, it takes on far more of the version where, as some more cynical people would say, is that yeah, Hong Kong people's religion is money, and sex and relationships kind of become part of this picture of success, and thus being commodified, and that's a whole topic in itself probably.
I guess it is very true that no matter whether you're religious or not, however, wherever that may be, you're born and raised, everyone has the capability to be either a completely horrible person or someone kind at the very least.
At this point, the bar is underground.
Mm-hmm.
And you were saying, Suzu, about the pulling us back on topic.
I was going to loop this back to how do we deal with this kind of oppression on whether it's a day-to-day basis or some way to like help you get through the rough moments that are bound to come and happen.
I mean, one of the reasons for having asexual groups is for asexual people to share their experiences and know they're not alone, and that's one way we deal with it. But then on a day-to-day level, I guess things would vary a lot. That really depends a lot on your individual circumstances. Where one thing I hear a lot is some asexual people who are single, for example, they work with the kind of people who are very nosy, who would ask them personal questions about why are you still single, or other kind of silly things like that, where I happen to work with sensible people who don't ask silly things like that, and that makes a huge difference.
Surround yourself with people who won't ask silly questions.
That's a part of it, but also on other kind of issues. It depends on I think that on simple terms, asexual people who do want a partner will face a specific set of issues about issues from their partner specifically, as opposed to ones who don't want a partner, then who instead may have issues with other people asking silly questions. That's that makes a big difference to what do they need to do to deal with the problems. But on a different level also, then there's the healthcare example that I mentioned earlier. That's a huge one, because it's not always easy to find a different medical practitioner if you have a problem with the one you're currently seeing.
And that is
Think-
just go on, children.
Go on.
That is definitely more a systemic issue, and also because asexuality at the moment, as has been mentioned before, is still a much less known thing, which causes its really the frustrating way it's treated in regarding medical health.
Yes.
You can go ahead, children.
I think in Indonesia there's also the problem of conversion therapy, right? Although not as common as conversion therapy for like gay people, bisexual people, it does still exist from what I've heard, I think. So there's also that added dimension of healthcare related issues, I guess. And I think another thing that comes up a bit regularly in another community server in Indonesia here is the issue of approachable therapists, specifically like psychologists and psychiatrists, because when we psychological and the psychiatrical help, basically, because at that moment you really need the support, right? And you are going to be very vulnerable, but you don't know whether you're going to get a therapist that actually adheres to the DSM, or that adheres to the more local guidebook, which still classifies homosexuality as a mental disorder, I think, or a mental illness.
Which kind of loops back to what Carrie said at the beginning of this about how that's the purpose of having aspec communities, where we do have somewhere to fall back on that understands our experiences. Although, yes, like a community is not your therapist, at the very least, they can help with easing any thoughts or negativity regarding your orientation.
And it also has that, like,
I think the way our community has developed is that I think it becomes where we not therapists, but we end up reviewing therapists on the basis
Yeah,
of whether
yeah,
they're accepting of our asexuality. We share that information.
Ah.
yeah. Like in the Swakavarna server, which is the large Indonesian queer community server that I mentioned earlier, there is a pinned message of a queer friendly therapist. So another function of community is to share resources, and I think what I was going to say was that yes, relate on the topic of community. Like when we first founded indo.aspec, we had very humble intentions. We just saw that there was a lack of access to information about asexuality and aromanticism because, for instance, Avon, which is like the first site you probably go to read up on asexuality, at least in the old days, and it's still a good information hub if you want like basic definitions of aspec terms. Because the URL is asexuality.org, it's blocked here in Indonesia, and you have to access it via using a VPN. And so that's one barrier, and the second one's also obviously that it's in English, and generally people probably aren't fluid enough in English to actually understand like articles and like forum posts, for example, on Avon, if they were able to access it with a VPN. So that's also another barrier. So our intention was just to like post on educational content on a platform that's easily accessible in Indonesian about the aspec identities. So at least the information is out there and it's accessible for people instead of behind a firewall, so to speak. And over time, we had we also always had the idea of like creating a community space and having it be an active community of people sharing resource and struggles. But we didn't. But when I imagined that, I was imagining stuff on the scale that would take years. But here we are not even close to a year later, and there's already a community space that's quite thriving actually. Like considering everything, and where was I going with this? Yes. During that whole period of us just being an Instagram account and us having a Discord server that's open to the public, I think we're still the only community space specifically for Indonesian asexuals and aromantics, right, Suzo?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So I'm the admin that's most often online on Discord in our server. There's a channel where a venting channel, and it's our most active channel, which should say a lot about our server. And because I have no formal skills in like any kind of psychological help, all I can do is just listen and offer constructive advice where possible, or just like commiserate where necessary. And I think it already helps a lot because there is a space for people to talk about it, and there are people there who will understand what you mean without having like to break out a PowerPoint or something. But the fact remains that this is basically, as far as we're aware, the only aspec community space that's available right now. And Indonesia is a very large country. So I mean, where was I going? I think I was just going on a tangent on what the importance of you can pick up wherever you want to, so I think, or Carrie, if you found anything that might resonate.
I suppose, like, I know that you were just like elaborating on the fact that yes, a community is a place where we can turn to at times, and that I guess I just wanted to very quickly add on a Discord vent channel is not your therapist either, but it is somewhere to
Yeah, I
just
think
yeah. Go on, Kerry.
a lot of local age group community leaders are people who went into it looking for community and unwittingly basically became kind of these community leader figures, and it's often quite a challenging experience in itself. It's a thankless job running groups like this, but then it's helping other people find out about their asexuality, knowing that they're not broken. That's what
It's very
motivates us to
rewarding.
keep doing this.
Like I like to joke that the my catchphrase is speedrun is SOP, like standard operating procedure, because like we started out with very humble beginnings, as I elaborated on earlier, but even close to a year after we were initially founded, and we already have an Instagram account with over 300 followers. Last I checked, we have an active community here on Discord, and it's surprising that this all happened so quickly, because I never imagined it would like stuff would happen this fast.
Yeah, and I will say, Carrie, that definitely the satisfaction and the proud feeling of like helping other people learn, showing them that yes, they aren't broken. There are people like you, like me, like us out here, and creating a safe space for people to just explore that experience is definitely the the best part of the quote unquote job.
I mean, maybe we want to get this back on track at the end. That since we've already talked about how to deal with oppression on a day-to-day basis, maybe we want to uh, talk about maybe since the whole moral panic, the moral panic in Indonesia has been talked by a podcast that invited a gay couple onto for an interview. Maybe we should talk about what could be some guidelines for tactfully or respectfully talking about queer issues as an ally or as a cishet person, cishet ally specifically.
Well, we for sure can't make hard guidelines on how to say this, how to say that. You're not allowed to say this, you're not allowed to say that. The well, I suppose from myself, the best guideline I can give is to approach it, to talk about it in a way you would approach anything else, with respect and research.
I think one thing that I can definitely add is don't use an inflammatory clickbait title.
For sure.
Yeah,
Like,
that's an important point, and I think also when talking about people in the community, I think getting your information from the right sources is also very important. Where knowing that it's like that no one individual aspect person represents the entire community, because yeah, the variations within the community can be easily erased when people who don't know what they're talking about try to talk about it.
for example, the experience of a demisexual person can be very different from, say, a asexual person or even an asexual person, right?
Oh, yeah, no one person is a monolith. So even in relying on one person, you have to be aware of biases, whether it's cultural or whatever biases. You have to be wary of those, and even of your own. Of like I said earlier, cis het allo person definitely has some biases that they may not be aware of.
And I think something I can add is just that there's a difference between courage of inviting inviting someone for an interview on a sensitive topic, and like there's a difference between bravery / representation and respectfully approaching an issue. Because just because you're talking about an issue doesn't necessarily mean that you're talking about it in a way that is respectful to all people involved.
And also about like just interviewing people for clicks, I guess. As you said earlier, like using an inflammatory title, a clickbait title, or just doing it not out of respect at all, just for your own gains, I suppose. Like,
one way to summarize what you're trying to say is that is to apply the golden rule, isn't it? Like, treat other people like you would want to be treated. Like, if it's a sensitive issue you don't want, like, think of it as something that's very personal, like stuff that you wouldn't want to share to just any one person, right?
Mhm.
So you want to approach it carefully in a way that both discusses the issues that are on hand, but also does it in a way that it doesn't violate any boundaries, and secondly, it's gentle, isn't it?
mm-hmm.
I think another thing that we could add is a bit related to another thing that has happened when so the context for this, that the social media outrage of the podcast that we've been mentioning copiously here in the stream, just as it started to die down, a pedestrian caught video footage of a man sitting in another man's lap at a cafe called Cafe Wow in South Jakarta, and it's been reported as like the narrative has been of a gay date, and the video went viral, and it had even been picked up by major news networks, and the dying embers have been stoked into a full-fledged fire again. And I think that, I mean, yes, it was a public place, but that's also violating privacy, isn't it?
It is, and there's also the sensationalism of it,
Mm-hmm.
where honestly it could just very easily just be boys being boys, guys being dudes, and just doing that. And there's the outside assumption of like, oh, they're gay, and suddenly everything is blown out of proportion because, oh, they might be gay and they're doing this in public. Where if there was no stigma around being queer at all, like none of this would be happening.
In an ideal world, aka not. Yeah. Also, there's also this an aspect of amateur normativity going on, right? Because it's been assumed that it's a date, but although it probably is a date, maybe I haven't kept up with the news. I just read the thumbnails of things people send me. It could also be something like a queer relationship, or like just close friends messing around, right?
Exactly, just guys being dudes, having fun. It's the outside person looking in, making assumptions just to get a headline, to make something go viral. That's really caused this entire thing to be blown out of proportions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think this sensationalism also, like, it factors in a lot of stuff. Like, an example was when the I think it roughly translates as the sexual violence law
Mm-hmm.
wasn't supposed to being passed. Like, an issue that has been debated violates the the phrase of, like, the inclusion of the phrase consent in the law, because obviously bad faith actors said that, like, interpreted as, if if we put the if we put the concept of consent into this law, that means that uh, extramarital sex wi- is legalized, and everyone will do it. And the context, the important part to note here is that extramarital sex is a sin, and it's very heavily stigmatized because we are such a religious country. So the sensationalism really plays into that.
And Carrie, tell me if I'm wrong, but I also know that this is an issue that I'm pretty sure was raised where it was, I don't know if it was national news or anything, about like, oh, trans people in bathrooms where it's like trans people shouldn't use the bathroom that they should be, where it's just like, oh, they're using it to, oh, what is it?
I think what you're trying to say is something like the arguments that have been used in the US, right? Like,
Yeah.
if trans women that are just this men who want to get into women's bathrooms because
Yes,
they
that's the phrase.
sexual offenses.
Yeah, we definitely have. Yeah, that's a very well known issue. Yeah, of trans people and bathrooms. My understanding is it's apparently more of a thing in the U.S. because of the way their public bathrooms are built. Apparently, like the walls between the stores don't actually go all the way up or down, so it's actually a lot easier for people to peek over or under them, which that in itself is an underlying issue regardless of gender. But yeah, this kind of demonizing of trans people as people who are out to do that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a common one, where a lot of trans people just avoid going to public bathrooms altogether because I think the issue is that a lot of us will feel that we will get in trouble no matter which one we go to. And yeah, non-gendered bathrooms are not always available.
Like, I haven't ever seen but technically I have, but it's unisex bathrooms in the places where bathroom facilities are limited in any case. For example, like in camping grounds.
Like, it would be easier if all bathrooms were just unisex.
Like, I don't quite, like, understand the rationale, because if someone is like a sexual predator, then they will do it. Then they will, like, do crimes no matter what we do, right? If they are really set upon it. But for the average layperson, you go to the bathroom to go to the bathroom, like, because you have to biological functions to take care of. You don't go there for socializing, actually. Especially not public bathrooms.
But yeah, it's always the few bad seeds that get
The minority.
the minority. that paints, usually for some reason that paints they use that minority to paint the wider queer community in a negative light.
I thought of something, but I forgot it now.
No
Yes,
worries.
the local minority, like the ones like that are so full of hate that they don't have anything better to do than mess around with other people's lives. It's easier to spread and it's more visible now because of the internet, I think, because it's not hard for things to get viral on the internet, right?
And the irony is that statistically, the largest proportion of actual sexual predators are actually cisgender heterosexual men. So
It's just unfortunate that cisgender heterosexual men are at the top of the food chain of the current society we live in.
Patriarchy.
Patriarchy.
Like, I think everyone has seen that Harry Potter meme of like, why is it when something happens, it's always you three? We should. An appropriate version here would be the one captioned. Why is it always you three? Patriarchy, heteronormativity, and amatonormativity. Maybe you want to add on something or Suzu?
Well, I suppose it's just that, yes, this is the current reality we're living in, that we have to face this kind of society, we have to face these small struggles, big struggles as we go along. But hopefully, with the presence of communities, with like whether how small or how big it may be, with the presence of people like ourselves, we can weather this. We can weather this together.
Which is also why we have a collaboration here in this live stream in the first place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just Indonesia and it's not just Australia, but there's some issues that are in common across the region where the people have similar values, and there's also global issues. And we're already the underdog. There's really no reason for us to have to all fight on our own if we can just help each other. Like, while the wider social norm, especially this era of capitalism, is that you have to put other people down to to elevate your own conditions. I always think that the collaboration is more fruitful than competition.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Maybe you have some closing remarks, so to say, Carrie.
Or maybe if you got something to plug, any sort of social media.
I mean, yeah, Australian Asexuals is on we on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Reading it out loud is actually pretty awkward, isn't it? Where can we post this in the comments in the stream?
Oh yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. So Australian Asexuals on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Yeah, I'll actually find the link. Hang on. Where is it?
Alright, go right ahead, no worries. And
Meanwhile, if any of our listeners in Indonesia or maybe with English stumbled across this stream and hasn't joined the server yet, and like to, you can find our community server in our Instagram bio at the indo.aspec. And we have a link tree in our bio, and the invitation is in the link tree.
as well as if anyone in chat has any questions they would like us to answer before we finish the stream off for tonight.
I think for good measure, we can also like post the links to our Australian asexuals in an Instagram story, right?
Yes, we'll get to that at after the stream then.
And also for anyone curious about the asexuality in general and aromanticism, the indo.aspec Instagram also has lots of posts that either explain the basic definition of an identity term, or actually has a featured story that is a lived example of people with those identities. Which actually reminds me that we have a survey about aspec labels and micro labels and people's experiences of being aspec. We should probably promote that survey again, even though we have a really large backlog of stories to go through. I think more featured stories is always better, isn't it?
Well, the more the merrier, as they say. We can you'll probably be able to find that on in the aspects link tree in the coming week. So, thank you to everyone who came to listen to us tonight for our discussion and topic, and thank you very much, Carrie, for coming to be our guest for the live stream.
Especially since there have been a lot of plan changes
On
over the
such
course
short
of
notice.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Alright. Thank you, everyone. Have a good time zone.